Bienvenue, benvenuti, and welcome to Expatriotical, the podcast for expats, travelers, and other adventurous souls. I'm Chandra, and after living as an expat with my husband and 4 children in 2 different countries for 6 years, I've learned the arts of pivoting during pitfalls, traveling tastefully for less, and soaking in amazing new cultures without losing your own. Join me as we dive into the joys and challenges of travel and the expat life in every episode. Hey everybody, I hope that this episode meets you on a joyous and sunny day. It's beautifully sunny and has been for close to a month here in Paris, and I'm so grateful. And I know that in the last 2 episodes, we have been talking about Paris, but we're going to take a quick break so that we can continue with our once a month TOEs, or Types of Expats, interview series. And for this one, I cannot tell you how excited I was for it and how I wished I could have made it longer. But don't worry, next week we'll jump right back in with our 3rd and final episode of the Highlights of Paris mini-series, where we talk about day trips from Paris. Today, I'm going to be talking to part-time expat and actually the non-cyclist co-founder of Expatriotical Cycling, Nancy De Losa. Nancy so generously opened up about her life growing up in Australia as the daughter of Italian expats who moved to Australia shortly after World War II. She also allowed me to dive into the curiosities that I have about what it would be like to be a part-time expat. And then we switched gears, no pun intended, and talked about something that I'm really developing a keen interest in and that my husband, Chris, is starting to dabble in, and that is going on cycling tours. But if you're not into cycling, don't run away. These tours are for everyone, the cyclist and the non-cyclist alike, and they sound amazing. But there's no need for me to tell you all about it because she does. So listen in. Nancy, welcome to Expatriotical. I'm so excited that you're here. And honestly, I kind of feel like I'm overflowing with questions about both you as an expat and Expatriotical, your business. But we'll get into all of that. And I wanted to start off with, I would love if you can share a little bit, Nancy, about yourself, starting with the beginning of being raised by Italian expat parents, I'm going to say, in Australia. What was that experience like?
Yeah, really interesting, Chandra, because I often say that it was like we really were raised as Italians, but in a foreign country, and
Amazing.
Yet that country was our home country. In terms of us children, our parents obviously were living in what was at that time a new country for them.
Yeah.
They ended up living in Australia longer than they did in Italy, actually. So it actually really became their home.
Okay.
But I think from a cultural perspective, you never let go of your roots, and we were very definitely brought up in a very Italian way. So both parents Italian. All of our family also immigrated to Australia. So all of my nonno, all my aunties and uncles, all my cousins, everybody. So we had a very big, family connection and family setup, which really we were raised with our family as being like our best friends, and we spent a lot of time together. So I now look at families here in Italy as I sit here each year and really identify with how they bring up their children, just that very thing about being included in everything, it was never off limits for us children to be part of anything to do with the family. So very much brought up in a very Italian way, but definitely in an Australian community setting. And I think one of the things too that probably my parents did very well was they integrated very well. So
Good.
While we lived a very Italian life at home, we were very integrated into the community. We lived in quite Anglo communities in Australia, in Melbourne, and we went to schools that, the first language was English, of course, always. Very much integrated into the community, and my parents were very big on that in the sense that they really wanted us to always speak English with them instead of speaking Italian with them, so that we were definitely feeling like we were Australian and not Italian when we were out in the community.
Okay, so can I expand on that? This wasn't written down. So but you did speak Italian like within your home, correct? And then that's why you're fluent now. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we did. But my parents really wanted us. I wonder sometimes whether it was because they wanted to learn English more than anything,
Right?
but they really wanted us to speak English with them while they spoke Italian with us.
Oh, perfect.
Um,
Okay.
it doesn't always work out like that because obviously with language, I think it's what comes to you. And so we often spoke Italian, of course, with our parents as well. But definitely between my parents and in them talking to us, always it was in Italian. And also with, as I said, my nonna and nonna and that sort of generation never really liked the language. So
Yeah.
we always spoke Italian. So yes, I was very much raised speaking Italian. But as I said, my parents were very big on us being integrated and feeling Australian, I think, is probably more than anything. So they really encouraged us to speak a lot of English as well.
That's good. That's very good. I love that. I love that you kept the Italian, you still have that connection, and the fact that's amazing that like all of your family came too. So you really had something very special that not all expats have, if you will, of having your family there and then also getting to experience this entirely new culture. That's really, really cool. So since your family moved to Italy, did you visit Italy much when you were growing up?
No, so we never came to Italy together as a family, which was
Amazing.
really, really interesting. Yeah. So my parents migrated in the 50s, I think,
Okay.
in what was really a very war-torn or post-war
Hmm.
period in Italy and quite a depressive, I guess, place. So for them, the dream of moving to Australia, and I think what was sold to them as well as, the big dream life and the opportunity for work and to get ahead in life was
Yeah.
very, very real for them. So they met in Australia. They didn't migrate together. In fact,
Oh, wow.
yeah, you'll be fascinated to hear that also my mum and her two sisters married two brothers and their uncle. So,
No.
yeah, so we have a very intertwined family existence in Australia amongst our two families.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, it is. So I think moving to Australia for them was, really for them following a dream, not probably
Hmm.
something that they had expected or were raised thinking about like we
Yeah.
do. But I think once it was sold into them, and I think once they arrived there and really did start to, I guess, integrate and live the life that they did, they became very attached to Australia and never really had the desire to come back to Italy, which is really interesting.
Okay, so then when was the first time that you went to Italy then?
Yeah, so I was 21
Okay.
and I decided that I wanted to go traveling and came over with a friend of mine. And yeah, the minute I landed, I just remember that feeling inside of me, that, heart trembling feeling of
Mm,
just feeling very connected. It was an
that's
incredible
amazing.
feeling. Yeah, I'm feeling it now as I'm talking to you and
When you recall
recalling
it.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's
So it,
amazing.
it became, I think, very real as to that upbringing and that sense of connection.
It like
Even though,
clicked maybe.
yeah, I think once you're physically in the place, I mean, obviously you feel it from afar as well, but I think once you're physically in the place and, physically surrounded by all that you've come to know within your heart, I think it just, yeah, it really moves you.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. So, kind of advancing on maybe past 21 and meeting, or sorry, and yeah, meeting Italy for the first time, if you will. How did you meet Acuto co-founder, Damien? And can you talk about that, and then maybe advance even into the catalyst of starting the business?
Sure. So fast forward 18 years
Okay.
from when I first came to Italy, I was in Victoria in Australia in the mountains at a cycling event. Now, I'm not a cyclist, but I was invited by a friend of mine who owns a winery in a very beautiful sort of mountainous region in Victoria to come along for the weekend to help her out to pour beers and wines at a cycling event,
Okay.
which for me was a very new experience. And I thought, why not? So off I went to Bright for the weekend. And my girlfriend actually said to me at the time, look, you never know, you might meet yourself a husband. And I said, yeah, of course.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, off we went. Yeah, off we went to the event and had a fun couple of days. And sure enough, yes, that was where I did meet Damien. So Damien is a cyclist, had been a cyclist all his life,
Wow.
but actually at the cycling event that we were at, he had left his career, which he had a career in advertising previously, and he'd left his career to start his own business, which at the time was Acuto, and was cycling clothing, Italian cycling clothing. He
Okay.
also was designing and producing t-shirts and casual wear for cyclists.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so we met and we hit it off very quickly. And one of the first conversations we had was on the first night we met was that we both had this dream. He said to me, are you Italian? And I said, yeah, I have Italian background. And he said, oh, that's amazing. I've always wanted to live in Italy. And I said, I do, I have too.
Oh my gosh.
So
I have the chills.
so
That's amazing.
so that conversation continued with me saying, I think the thing for me is that I'm so connected to my family as well. So I'd always probably find it difficult to maybe live abroad for 12 months of the year, but hey, 6 months and 6 months would be ideal. And he said, sounds good to me. And within a year, we were married.
Oh, wow.
And then within 3 years, I also then decided we actually came overseas and into Italy, and I decided that I'd got back to Australia and decided that was probably the time to call it on my career. I just had this inner feeling of knowing that I wanted to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to Damien, look, I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to join you in the business. And he said, what will we do? And I said, I don't know. Let's work it out.
Let's figure it out.
Yeah, so I joined him in the business. We came back to Italy the following year on a business trip. As I said, he was sourcing product from Italy. And he did a bike ride in Chianti in Tuscany, very famous bike ride, and called L'Eroica. And he wrote that about that experience in a blog. And then we had some clients ask us that whether we took tours because it looked amazing.
Oh,
And at the time, I mean, Chandra, you would know Luca in Italy, in Tuscany. We were sitting
yes.
there having an aperitivo. This is a few days after the event. And this email came in, the first one, and then a couple more. And we sort of looked at each other and went, there's something going on here. Maybe we
Yeah.
do take tours. So with that, we came back to Chianti, which was a 2-hour drive away, and went around knocking on the doors of B&Bs and places to see whether we could secure some accommodation for the following year. And we did. And we put down our deposit on some accommodation and off we went on our cycling tours business. So
Wow.
it kind of, yeah, it's kind of all just has fallen into place. And I say it happens to us, but I think it's part of being in the flow of listening to your heart and, taking decisions to follow your dreams in life that at certain periods of time just feel so natural to take. I think
That makes sense.
that's the key element. Yeah.
I think that it happened to you, like the feeling kismet, or like there's just a little touch, from above.
Yeah.
When you said you got the first email, I just more chills of like, wow, that's really crazy. Like you're I don't want to say in the market for like what are you supposed to do, but you were open, right? You were open and ready to receive. So I think that's really cool. So how was it working through some of those initial challenges of like, how exactly are we going to do this?
Yeah, it's so interesting, Chandra, because I think, as I sort of mentioned, I think points come to you if you remain open. I think there are certain points in time where you just need to make decisions. And I think you tend to make decisions that sometimes are with your head and sometimes with your heart, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
there's a bit of a struggle between those. But I think each time we resolved those points. So really from the time when we first said, yes, we do tours, let's start this life, I guess, to when we actually started to really live the life of 6 months in Australia and 6 months in Italy, there was a 3-year period. And in that 3 years, I think some of the decision points along the way were financial. I think
Yeah,
part
absolutely.
of it is, I think I had listened to your episode about the types of expats, and I think probably being the types of expats that we are, which is the part-time expats, it doesn't come cheaply, and you do
Yeah.
have to make some decisions along the way. So yeah, there were some financial considerations, obviously, as we were building up the business of tours. And also I had maintained some part-time consulting work in Australia to sort of assist us through that period.
Sure.
So that was part of the driver. The other part was that we didn't have a home here for that time. So we were very much in transit and very much, coming to Italy and running a tour and then living. We did find ourselves a base. So while we didn't own a home here, we did find ourselves a base and we kept coming back to that apartment. So that sort of gave us a little bit of a sense of home, and the people who owned that apartment have since been very instrumental in helping us set up our life. Very beautiful people. And they really created a very instant sense of family and community for us, which was a real blessing.
That's
So
awesome.
I think along the way, it was about feeling our way through that period of feeling that, yes, this business of tours was definitely something that we wanted to do and was definitely something we wanted to invest in and grow. So there was a very sort of business-driven decision around
Push
it.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And thankfully, again, things were happening there. As we ran more tours, more people were asking for more tours. So within a period of 3 years, we grew from 1 tour to 8 tours fairly
Wow.
quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a fairly aggressive time frame, but we were spending quite a lot of time here in terms of, doing a lot of research and being on the ground. It was so critical for us in terms of those very early phases. So while we weren't strictly living 6 months, we actually came back and forward a little bit during that time. We were still spending a lot of time here in Italy. And that was really critical to the life that we now have and the life that we now
Exactly.
live.
To,
Yeah.
to growing the business, to growing your life there. That makes complete sense. And so I have one more question, and then we're going to jump into talking about a Q2. But I'm so excited to jump into that. But I will say that secretly, or maybe not so secretly, I would love to own something in Cinque Terre and live there part time, and then something somewhere else, probably in America or something like that. But how has it been balancing that life between the two countries, and not just from a business standpoint, but just from a personal standpoint? What is that like to do that?
Yeah, so I reflected on that quite a lot before this interview because I think that's a really critical component of it. And I think while definitely it is a dream life, and I know that a lot of people use the language of living a dream life, there are challenges, absolutely. I think with any life there's challenges, but some of the challenges that I think are very real is, and I personally and particularly feel this, is that the transition each 6 months is quite unsettling.
Oh,
So
okay.
Damien doesn't feel it as much as I do, and I don't know if it's because obviously we're all different, but maybe it's because when I'm in Australia and I get very close to my family and friends again, and then I have to uproot and leave, the sort
Mm,
of the uprooting period and then the settling in period is quite a transition for me. So I'm very aware of that now. And I remember when it was first happening, I was like, oh, is this really how I want to live? And is this really what I want to do? But I recognize now that it's just a transition period that I need to work through each time. And I think, something that Damien and I reflect on often is a big part of that too helps you to grow as a person.
oh, yeah.
Dealing with those changes, dealing with letting go of family and friends that you hold very closely and very dearly, and having to say goodbye to sometimes to people that you think, well, it might be an elderly aunt and I may
Mm-hmm.
never see her again. So
Mm,
you're sort of dealing with very real potential endings, I would call it, that maybe you don't think about in an everyday life if you just live in one place.
yes.
And I think that's an important part of your personal and emotional development as well. And in terms of understanding your relationships and knowing, I know that when I leave Australia or when I leave Italy, that I may never see people again, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think, we probably should live like this all the time, I guess, but we
Yeah.
don't. So I think things become heightened and you become more aware of what's important. So in one breath, it's a challenge. In another breath, it's a very rewarding, growing experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I embrace it in that way, in the sense that the challenge of uprooting and moving countries, but then the rewards that come with that, of course, are significant as well. So both countries offer us completely different lives, and both very beautiful. and both in very different ways. So I think, we feel very blessed and feel that we definitely have the best of both worlds with the life that we live.
I love that. And you really offered something that I hadn't really thought about of that. I mean, I have moved multiple times before getting married, after getting married, with my husband having his position now. We moved different countries. And so I hadn't really thought of, like, if you do the part-time expat thing and you really get settled in and you're not in vacation mode, and you've made the effort, you have developed those relationships in that place where your family is not. And so that would be hard to leave there, but then also hard to leave your family to go back. And I can also relate to when we have what we call home leave trips, and I think a lot of expats call them that, but where you go back home or whatever. And when you have aging family members, for me, it's my grandma. And so we went at Christmas time, and she actually had gotten sick and was in the hospital. And it was, yeah, it's very emotional. She got out before we left, but it was like, this could be the last time that you see them. And that is definitely something to think about. It's a little bit of a sacrifice, but then the life on this side is also very much so worth it. So it just helps you to grow as a person.
It does, definitely. And I think, Sandra, just on that too, because now we're in a situation where, and friends and family will say it, is where's home? And we say, both places feel like home, but in very different ways. And I think a big part and a big conscious decision, I think, that we made with the place that we selected to be our home initially was very much around the people and the community around us that we had grown to become close to. And I think in being in a foreign country, and particularly I think the notion of being an expat is something we probably don't think about too often, because we live in a small community around Italians. So we don't see ourselves sort of being surrounded by, I think the notion of an expat often is, maybe it's a confused notion, but a sense that you're surrounded by other people like you, living the same life as you potentially. But no, there's no one around here living the life that we're living. They're all Italian. And so we've developed very strong relationships here. So equally, as much as leaving Australia is difficult to leave some of our close family and friends, equally leaving Italy is really difficult because we established really strong connections here in Italy as well. And so now we feel that home is in both places. Home is where we both are, I think.
Yes, that's key.
Yeah. And so we create that feeling around us wherever we are.
I love that. That's beautiful. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the talking about Acuto and the cycling tours. And I will say, though, thank you so much for being willing to share that other aspect, because it goes in line with the Types of Expats series that we've been in once a month. And so I really appreciate that. But I would love to ask you to please describe for me what a tour experience is like when you are on a tour with Acuto, and what is it like for a day in the life of one of your cyclists or guests?
Sure. So a typical day is we get up, have a wonderful breakfast wherever we are, because generally the food is amazing wherever we are in Italy. But have a wonderful breakfast, fuel with coffee, and usually the cyclists hit the road by about 9 a.m. And a typical day is sort of around 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So about 6 hours, sometimes 7, just depends on the day. That involves the ride, which can be, on average, it depends on also the region, but, on average about 70, 80 kilometers, sometimes 100 kilometers. Yeah, sorry, I'm talking metrics.
It's okay. We're going to say 50 miles max.
Okay. And also, as you know, with Italy, some very hilly and mountainous terrain. So usually quite a lot of climbing.
Yeah.
And Damien loves to climb as well. So he does tend to find the hills and the mountains, definitely, on his route selections. So a typical ride is about 6 to 7 hours, and it will involve obviously the climbing and the riding, but also a couple of stops along the way, coffee stops.
Nice.
Often, a really lovely lunch stop. So we're both very big on making sure that we're introducing our guests to places that are very authentic and very real. And for Damien, I mean, a lot of the recceing and research that we do is as much about, you know, those roadside stops on the en route as to where will I take people for lunch, and what will we eat when we're there, so that, you know, we make sure that people are exposed to the very local experience. And I think the beautiful thing about the lunch stops is that they're just so local and so authentic. So they're really tiny little places, you know, on the side of a road or in a tiny little village, because often they are riding kind of off the beaten track, if you like. So I think the day in the life of the cyclist is just, Damien would describe the day as perfect and the night even more perfect, in the sense that they then have a couple of hours off and,
Yeah.
you know, have a rest or have a swim or what have you. And then we regroup for aperitivo every evening. And we usually choose a gorgeous little bar somewhere in the piazza or in the back street somewhere. And that's the time for sharing stories from the day. And it's, you know, it's also where, because we also offer a non-riding partner program with our tours, so which I host. So our non-riders and our riders come together and they're sharing their experiences from the day. So it's a really beautiful hour of sharing stories. And then we move on to dinner, which always is a highlight. Food and wine is a very big part of the tour for us. And, you know, we almost say that it's a tour within the tour, because we put so much effort and focus into the food and wine experience and to making sure that people have a very immersive experience in the places we're in. So off we go to dinner, and generally the day wraps up by around 10 p.m. at night, maybe 9:30, depends where we are. Cyclists tend to like to have their sleep after a big day out on the
Yes.
bike, and especially as the days go on and you know the evenings go on, they get even more tired. So yeah, we tend to pace that all out through the week. So most tours are 8 days, 7 nights. And yeah, it's just a very beautiful experience of what Damien describes for a cyclist as the perfect day, of this balance of landscapes, riding, food, wine, people, storytelling. Yeah, it's a very beautiful day.
And so you mentioned to me about, or just now, you mentioned about the non-cyclist partners or friends, let's say, that just wanted to go to Italy and their friend is going on a cycling tour and they're like, "Can I go? But I don't ride it. I don't really ride." And can you share a little bit about what you do when you're hosting those guests?
Sure. So we've had everyone from, I mean, we do call it the non-riding partner program, because we've had everyone from people's, you know, spouses and partners, through to people bringing their mum on tour, through to people bringing,
I love
yes, their
that.
aunt, their cousin, everybody. So it's a really nice experience to share for those people. So as you said, often they've had a long held dream to be in Italy, and this is an opportunity for them. So I host the non-riding program, and every day is very different. I definitely have an active component to the program. So I believe that being active is very important also for our non-riding partners. So that includes often hikes in nature, sort
Nice.
of, yeah, 10, 12 kilometre hikes in nature, which will also include like a picnic lunch or a little stop at a little trattoria for lunch, something like that. So it's not just the walking, but, you know, walking is a very important component. Through to, if we're in south of Italy and we're by the water, we might do a kayaking experience or a
Oh,
canoeing
cool.
experience. Yeah, so there's a range of active experiences depending on the region we're in and
Hmm.
the locale. And that's blended with other, probably more culturally immersive experiences.
Okay.
So there's always a cooking class. I always have a request for a cooking class.
Oh, yes, of
Yeah,
course.
which I always say is so much more than just learning about cooking, because for me, and maybe it's about the types of cooking classes I tend to select as well, is it's like an immersion with the family for the day. You know, so well, it's beyond the cooking. It's learning about their family life. It's having lunch with them at the end, and often the family members are joining us. And so it's a very culturally immersive day and a really wonderful day. The other part that I think is really important that I love to build into the programs is just introducing people to the ethos and attitude towards food and food production in Italy. So
Hmm.
often I'll visit places like olive oil producers, for example, because, you know, a lot of us use olive oil. A lot of people, and I know particularly from Australia, are learning still about olive oil and
Oh.
its benefits and how to choose the right olive oil and, you know, that sort of thing. So I tend to find that those types of experiences give people a really great insight into why food in Italy is so wonderful, and especially when you're choosing high quality food, and also why things like olive oil and these are, you know, almost deemed medicine initially by the locals. And people really enjoy learning about those components. So it could be olive oil, it could be cheese making. We do burrata cheese making in Puglia. It could be visiting farmers. So there's a whole range of different experiences, but I believe that's an important part of the program. So yeah, the program for non-riders, very diverse and very immersive. And often we'll have riders ask us in the morning, what are you people doing today? Because, I might take a day off the bike and come and join you because it sounds so exciting. So yeah, we also, as time goes on, I'm trying to build more of what has been a traditional non-rider experience into a cyclist day as well, and trying to give them as much as we can of some of those culturally immersive experiences as well.
I love that. That's fantastic. There's so many things that I could say, but I will continue to go down, and maybe we can touch back on that of the different things that I wanted to ask you. So my husband is beginning to dabble in cycling. I mean, he's always had a bike, but he's beginning to dabble in it. And you kind of mentioned the length of, you said like 70 or 80, 90 to 100 kilometers. And I think his longest is like 80 or 90. So I'm like, okay, like that's kind of on par with what you're doing. But do you have tours that are maybe geared towards people that haven't done a ton? They're super interested, but they'd like to jump in, but they haven't had a ton of experience.
Yeah, we do. So Puglia is a great example of that. So Puglia is one of only two areas in Italy that has some flatter terrain, I would say. Yeah. So as you know, Chandra, most of Italy is quite mountainous and hilly. Yeah, which makes it very spectacular and beautiful, but also makes it a lot more challenging on a bike.
Exactly.
So Puglia is one of those regions. We're probably one of the first companies to start a tour in Puglia for that very reason. Is we were getting inquiries from people saying, look, I'd love to join you on a tour, but I'm really not sure that I'm up to that amount of climbing. So we introduced Puglia back in 2018 as a tour. It's a flatter tour, I would say. So in terms of the amount of climbing, it's half the amount of climbing or elevation as the next tour from there, which is Tuscany. So Puglia tends to be our tour, which is probably the more aspirational type of tour. And people, definitely because it is 7 days of riding back to back, people definitely need to do training. So I think part of it is when people are inquiring and we're talking to people about the tours, part of it is assessing not just their physical capability or potential to be able to train on the bike, but also their mental capability. What's their attitude towards, we'll have people, for example, who haven't ever done that amount of riding, but they're like, that is something I really want to do in my life. It's a bucket list item for me. I really want to achieve riding the Puglia Tour. We had a lady 2 years ago who joined us who hadn't been on a bike for 7 years. She was just coming back into it. She trained for the tour solidly for 3 months prior to joining, and she completed every kilometre on tour and had just a wonderful experience. So part of that is the mental preparation as well. And I think something we do recognise is people are busy often. A lot of our guests are professional people and, often have big jobs. And so training isn't always easy. So Damien really tries to help each client out with ideas around how they can best train, which might involve also some indoor training or, taking 5 days off in a row to train and that sort of thing. But without doubt, I think most tours for most people require a level of training.
A level, yeah. You can't just jump in.
Yeah. No. And that goes also, we get a lot of inquiries for e-bikes and it goes also, so we do provide e-bikes on tour, but one thing we do say is that because of Italy's terrain, often it's either, quite technical in terms of it being sort of hairpin bends in the mountains through to some technical sort of winding roads in Tuscany right down to Puglia, where sure there might not be as much climbing and technical turns in the roads, but sometimes the terrain could be a little bit more rough than it is in the north of Italy in terms of the quality of the roads. So whatever the terrain is, there's a level of experience that is required with riding a bike and also riding a bike in a group and being cognizant that you're around other people, giving other people space.
Oh, that's so true. Yes, because getting too close doesn't end well sometimes. So
no, that's right. So we do a lot of briefing, a lot of pre-tour preparation of our riders. Damien does a briefing every single day on tour before the riders head out, explaining to them what they're doing, what they can expect today, to be mindful of giving each other space, all of that. So I think there is definitely a mentality and a psychology that is required that involves some experience with cycling.
Yeah,
For sure.
that makes sense. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that you kind of, in the inquiry process, you kind of let them know that this is something you have to train for, because I think it sounds like everything that you're doing is very curated, very I'm trying to think of the word, just very cognizant of what the entire experience is going to be like for your guests and the riders. And it sounds like you put that out front just so that it's, because it's a commitment with the training, just with everything, price, like with expenses of flying there and all that sort of thing.
Definitely.
So I think that's
And
awesome.
I mean, our goal is that everybody walks away having had a wonderful experience. And, that can mean different things to different people as well. So as I
Sure.
say, one person is very happy to say, hey, I'm really happy to take a day off the bike and join the non-riding program today. Whereas another person is just so driven to complete all the kilometers on the bike that,
Yeah.
that's their measure of success. So I think what we're trying to very much deliver is, and I think we do it quite well, is a personal experience for everybody, that they come away feeling that they've achieved or experienced what they wanted to experience from the tour.
I love that. And so I have a question because going through your website and just looking at, like you said, just the immersive experience of the food. And you talk about these little, just little cafes along the side, or just a little village that you go to. And that's, from personal experience, one of the most memorable dinners I ever had was just going and being amongst family and friends. And it was a little tiny cafe, but they had put some tables in the middle of a palazzo in Shaka in Sicily. And it was the most wonderful. It was just so wonderful. And we felt so cared for and so loved and just so included. And looking at your pictures, I was like, this is my relation to that. And so could you talk about, basically, with all of the hostings, what is one of your favorite things about hosting the guests on a tour?
Yeah, I think that sense of the unexpected, I think, as you just described, just being able, knowing the places that we're going to. Obviously, we do a lot of research and we do a lot of work with our partners in the various regions, and creating these very unexpected experiences is a real joy. And, I think I mentioned that we put a lot of effort into the food and wine experience, and every day is very different. So our sense of what is an authentic experience or what is a really great food and wine experience doesn't mean that you're always, paying through the roof for an amazing meal, or that you're at a Michelin restaurant, or that, you're dining in a gorgeous dining room. Every day is so different. And we deliberately and consciously create the tour. We often have people say on the first night, well, that was amazing. How do we top this? And we say, actually, we don't top it. We do something different.
I love
so
it.
I think every day is just very different, and it can be right down to a very rustic dinner in a town which they're known for, and with plastic chairs. And I always say, my memory of growing up in an Italian family was a party meant that you had plastic chairs and plastic plates. And so whenever I see it in Italy, because you still see it, I say to people, this is what,
this is a
Italian
real
party life is. Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
Through to some very beautiful dining experiences in some gorgeous restaurants. So I think each place offers something very different, and being able to create that very unexpected experience and very diverse experience is probably the greatest joy we have in terms of what we create for our guests. And it's just that sense of hospitality and sense of feeling that, knowing what's coming the next day and knowing that we don't need to top it, but we're just creating something different is
that's so wise. That's so wise.
And so real initially, so possible. I think that's the other thing that's just so wonderful, is that it really offers all of that, and you don't need to be going to very expensive restaurants all the time to be having a great food experience in Italy. As you said,
No,
it
that's
can be
so
really
true.
simple.
Yes.
And it is about the ambience that's created, the warmth. The people that are hosting the dinner with us, who are often, the restaurant owners, or we might be creating a dinner experience with our hotel partners. So whatever it is, I think that creating of something very special is each day is really a lot of fun.
Oh my goodness. This is number one. I almost feel like my mouth is watering, just like imagining all the different offerings of foods and that sort of thing. And so if people are interested in discovering more about Acuto and cyclists or non-cyclists, because I love that you cater to both, can you please tell everyone where they can find you online?
Yeah, so our website is a really great resource. So www.acutocycling.com. So we have lots of great blogs and lots of great information. We often get lots of people mentioning to us the quality of the information on our site is really helpful. We also publish almost daily on Instagram and Facebook, and we're always, when we're on tour, we're always posting about the experiences. So social media is also a great resource, and you can contact me via LinkedIn. So they're generally the channels through which we communicate and where people can find out information about us.
I love that. Nancy De Losa, co-founder of Acuto Cycling Tours, you have been a delight. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you have a wonderful next tour coming up.
Thank you so much, Chandra. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you also.
It's my pleasure. You all, it was such an absolute delight to talk to Nancy. With her Aussie smile and Italian warmth, she was so easy to talk to. It felt like I was sitting down talking to a friend that I just hadn't spoken to for a while. So I can imagine what it must be like to join her and her husband Damien on one of their many cycling tours. I really also loved the insights that Nancy shared about how it can be difficult or even unsettling to be a part-time expat, uprooting your life twice a year to go back to another life in a different country that you feel very much so connected to as well. But Nancy also painted the picture that it's beautiful and truly worth it, and that she loves both countries and the friends and family there dearly. So I would just like to say another great big thank you to Nancy De Losa of Acuto Cycling for taking the time to chat with me. And I also want to remind you to check out their website at Acuto Cycling. That's AQTOcycling.com to learn more. And because, let's just be honest, podcasting is a great medium, but it's for audio and you need a visual, you need to go see the pictures of the amazing food and the tours that they do. Oh, and surprise, surprise, Acuto Cycling is our Shan Select of the week. And as always, I'm not an affiliate, just a fan from afar. That's it for today, everyone. As a reminder, when we have interviews, we don't normally have a quote of the day, but don't worry, we will also pick that back up next week when we finish our 3-part mini-series, The Highlights of Paris. Looking forward to meeting you back here again next week. And until then, this is Chandra Ali reminding you to live and travel in the know with Expatriotical.